the venue is full. And this is the beginning of a process that will take, at least in one part of this discussion related to Section 25 and the parliamentary mandate, will go through to August. And I'm sure there are going to be many, many dialogues. So welcome to you, and thank you very much for coming and putting your valuable time in. We're going to spend these 2 days together. I know some people are going to be here for 1 or 2 days, so I understand we'll be a rolling group. The media have been invited, as you know, so please be aware that in all the plenaries the media will be here, but in the commissions and the plenary tomorrow afternoon that will be closed, and we will be having briefings for the media at an appropriate time. Lunch meal will be held outside where you registered, and we have a dinner tonight, and I'll get an indication later for attendees for the dinner. And from safety point of view, just so you know, there are 2 fire exits at the back, and this is also a fire exit in the unlikely event we need that. So it's my pleasure to open this conference and call on Professor Quinton Johnson to share a few remarks about what we're trying to achieve and why we've gathered. So please join me in welcoming Quinton Johnson.
Is this the only slide?
No, there's 4.
Is the second the program?
No.
Is the commissions? That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Professor Bernadelle and Gibbs for the wonderful occasion of gathering here. He has indicated that we don't quite know necessarily how this will unfold, but we know this, that it is a quintessential gathering that deals with a national question of great complexity. I must say, just by way of background, that several years ago the National Forum thought it proper to create a platform for dialogue, for engagement and discussion. And oftentimes it has been robust, but it's been respectful. It's been radical, but yet rational. And all along trying to understand how we crystallize the complex issues related to land, and in particular, land hunger. Several years ago, we began the first such engagement. I was saying to Dr. Rampele, we oftentimes meet in venues of this nature and in cathedrals and other such places. In fact, the very first such meeting was in a cathedral. We thought that it might be potentially hot, and we thought that that might be the right place to have it. And it was out in George, the Southern Cape, and we had a gathering pretty much like this. And then subsequently, we thought it'd be good to take this across the country in association with several universities. And today we are here at Gibbs. We at Nelson Mandela University are celebrating Tata Madiba's 100th birthday this year, as the country and the world is. And I recall him saying on one particular occasion when he received an honorary doctorate at Harvard with us that we should always try and seek the better angels of our nature. The better angels of our nature. And we take a view that this kind of engagement is one of unconditional positive regard for each other. We all, as South Africans, wish to resolve this kind of complexity, which we just discussed this morning in the holding room as one of the great original sins, land dispossession. We all know about 1913 and the Land Act, and the very many acts beyond that that removed land from our people and caused an enormous fissure and series of fractures across our society that has resulted largely in this inequality, this vast canyon of inequality that we have to contend with. not to mention unemployment, which is rampant. And, more importantly, significant compromise of our human dignity. In fact, we, as a forum, have oftentimes spoke about the reality that land is not just a matter of property, and that indeed land is about our history, our heritage, our families, our connectedness. It's about the reclamation of our heritage and the restoration of our dignity. And so we gather here. And it would be wonderful if in this 100th anniversary year of Tata Madiba, and also the 100th anniversary year of Mase Sulu, that we deal comprehensively with this matter of the land for our people, and that we bend the arc of hope through land reform and redistribution and equity and justice toward a simply better future that advantages especially the poor. When we began this dialogue, we thought it useful to focus on the Khoisan because the history of the Khoisan in the Southern Cape is quite significant. And the first dialogue engaged principally around land and language, history and heritage, and social cohesion within the context of the rights of the Khoisan. And we are delighted as a country, we certainly as a forum, delighted to note that our president had indeed met with Khoisan leaders not long ago to help them understand that our government wishes to ensure that indeed these matters of great import to them, as well as to all of us, will be dealt with at the highest level and dealt with comprehensively. We are gathered here today because at the 54th elective conference of the ANC, a resolution was taken to expropriate land without compensation. And that resolution has moved toward Parliament and has been welcomed by Cabinet. And so we gather here to ask a number of questions around what this would mean for our country. In fact, the President had indicated that this particularly important matter should unfold against the backdrop of improved agricultural productivity, elevated food security, and of course, enhanced investment. And we gather here to deal with those particularly important matters. What are the means, the mechanisms, the modes by which we here gathered will unpack land expropriation without compensation within that particular context? There is no doubt, of course, that there are very many who also believe that we should not expropriate land without compensation because the Constitution guides us in that particular regard. And as you know, the Constitution holds that indeed there can be expropriation for the sake of the public interest and for the public purpose. Later on today, and I will come back to the podium to perhaps explain some of the programmatic matters that we will deal with, we are going to talk a little bit about 4 commissions, which we will in fact go into. 4 commissions we will go into that will deal with these important matters. We welcome the Honourable Maite Mkana Mashabane. Minister, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you all. Please come inside. It's great to have you all here. Thank you very much. You should have a program before you that speaks about 3 important panels. The first one is about land reform and the critical issues regarding land. And our format will be that there are going to be several short presentations in that regard. And then land reform with regard to accelerating land redistribution and economic development. And if you turn the page, there's a final panel that we have, in fact, 3 and 4, on elevating agricultural production, improving food security, and increasing investment. And then the last panel will deal with models and mechanisms and means of how we do all of this together. I want to just add my warmest welcome to everyone as well and observe all our protocol and wish us well in the coming deliberations. One of my favorite poets won a Nobel Prize for Literature, spoke about hope and history rhyming. And whenever I come into spaces and places of this nature, I feel that hope and history rhymes. I'm now going to call upon the Honourable Deputy Minister, Jeremy Cronin, to introduce our opening speaker, the Honourable Minister, Gwede Mantashe. Please welcome him.
Good morning to everyone, to colleagues and friends. My task is very easy. First of all, let me thank the National Forum for Dialogue. I think this is a very important and timely initiative, and great appreciation for that. And particularly thanks to Professors Nick Binadal and to Quinton Johnson. My task is quite easy. It's to introduce, it's a little difficult actually, to introduce, it's very hard to get my tongue around the notion of the Honourable Gwede Mantashe. Minister Gwede Mantashe. But it's great that he's here. And what is interesting about Minister of Mineral Resources Gwede Mantashe is that he himself is very actively involved in a very important national dialogue as we speak, and that is to really sort out the spaghetti of confusion that has surrounded the whole mineral mining sector and so forth. And I think I can think of no better person than him to be leading that process, to really ensure that this important sector is sustained. He's also very qualified to be here today. Because everyone knows him as a former mine worker, okay, and as a former Secretary General of the ANC and currently the chairperson of the ANC. Not everybody knows that actually his real passion is farming. He's a farmer, okay. I like to call him a kulak, okay, because he's not a small farmer. He's quite a successful farmer in Kala. He pretends to be a communist, but he's also a farmer. And I think that brings an interesting mix of skills and issues and passions to the debate and discussions that we're going to have over the next 2 days. So please, let's welcome the Honourable Minister Gwede Mantashe.
Program directors, thank you very much. Everybody present here. I'm not going to call you by name because Rampele City, CC, another person who's very important, and then I'm found guilty of being selective in my memory. So, thank you very much. Let me start off by putting a disclaimer. I was called to come and talk here today. And I said, but it's not my portfolio. It's in government, their portfolios. I'm learning very fast. I've never been in government. The closest I came to government was when I was a councillor in Boksburg. And there's very important incident. There was a mayor for 3 hours, and yes, I was a mayor for 3 hours, and my caucus decided I must never be allowed to act, because I took serious decision within 3 hours. I said, no, bad news, this man must never be allowed. But I still write it in my CV, mayor of Boksburg for 3 hours. So now I'm in government. When people say, hey, minister, I forget sometimes. I just walk and think later, they're calling me. That's the situation I'm finding myself in. Some 2 years ago, we're in this same venue, I think. I made a point that said then, there was nothing talking about expropriation without comments. I said to the audience, if rational people in South Africa don't take the discussion on land forward and come up with ideas that make land redistribution a reality, the extreme peripheries are going to take over the debate, and this debate is going to be characterized by anarchy. We're close to that now. We still have a chance. And the point I was making to my colleagues who are farmers, really in the main white farmers, say to them, volunteer land, because there's land hunger among black South Africans. And if you think that the status quo can continue, you're applying a seed for land occupation. At that time, we said, if it starts here, Zimbabwe will be a Sunday picnic. That's what we said. Because you see, when you're hungry for something, you can't access it. You smell it. You can't access water, because water rights are given to farmers and they go through a village, and that village cannot access that water. You are actually sowing seeds for anger. That is what I said 2 years ago. And I said, let's have this debate, let's have the dialogue, let's talk about it, let's agree on how to manage the land question in a way that allows all of us to be having access to land. Jeremy says, I'm a farmer, and he says, a successful farmer. You see, I made an argument talking to mine stakeholders. They said 30% is not substantial. And I say, mathematically it is. It is substantial is from 0 to 30. But if you compare 30 to 100, it's not substantial. And they left me alone, I said, if it's 0, there's nothing. Then you advance, you reach 30%, that is substantial. But if you compare that 30 to 100% ownership, then you may argue it's not substantial. I think that debate is going to be featuring here in one form or another. The first narrative that we must demystify is the narrative that black ownership of land is equivalent to destruction of food production and food security. I think we should totally demystify that narrative, destroy it, because it's a dangerous narrative. Because if you don't have access to land and they say you can't farm, they are right, because you can't be a farmer unless you farm. And you can't farm unless you access land. So it's a dangerous narrative that giving land to blacks will destroy food security and will destroy food production. It's a dangerous narrative. And I think we should first demystify that notion totally. Secondly, I don't know whether, Jeremy, this is expropriation that we're talking about or is restoration. I think we should look into that, because you see, I was born in Kala, grew up there, I still regard Kala as my home. And one of the things that I've been raising in the ANC all the time, first of all, as a lone voice, to say this debate on land is a wrong debate. We're debating it wrong. And number one, we're raising this thing that 1913 cannot be the date. It's a wrong date. And people ask me why. I said, I grew up in the Eastern Cape. You can't talk land redistribution in the Eastern Cape without talking to the wars of dispossession. Because if you are separating them, you're going to have an academic debate, you're not going to deal with it. There's a man who is my hero in the Eastern Cape called Johannesburg Maqoma. He's my greatest hero. He fought 7 of the 9 major wars of dispossession. He commanded them. He became a general without being a general. He became a king without being a king, because he fought these 7 wars. One of the most exciting one is the Battle of Xhoxho, because Xhoxho was the brother to Kyali. There was this land between the Kiskama and the Fish River, which was declared as a no man's land. And Xhoxho, as a young man, took the cattle to that land and he grazed them there. And then the British soldiers came and wanted to take this cattle, and he said, no, you can't take these cattle because they belong to the royal family. They scratched him with a bullet and he bled. And they described this incident as he came to Maqoma. They don't say bleeding. It's very graphic because they say, Wafika eli jaja likas. You see, that language is the language of war. Ufike eli jaja likas. Meaning that he was bleeding profusely. And then Maqoma said, there can be no peace when the children of Ngega are bleeding like this. That battle started, the Battle of Xhoxho. So I'm raising that issue because you can't be ahistoric in dealing with the land question. That is the first thing. You can't be ahistoric. You must be historic. You must link it to the wars of dispossession. You must be able to trace the movement of the boundaries from the Great Brak to the Great Fish, Kiskama, Kume, Kai. Because those were results of wars, and every time they were moved, that's why we talk of land, we're not talking of animals. But history tells us that after every war, once they were defeated, there was also a charge of X hundreds and thousands of cattle that were taken as a punishment. You are defeated, you are pushed, go to the east of the Kume River, therefore you must pay 14,000 cattle. And therefore the animals that are going with the land must be factored in the debate, because we went through that process painfully that way. Until we do that, you see, when there was a consolidation of a municipality in that area they called Raymond Mhlaba, I was arguing that it should be Johannesburg Maqoma, because he fought battles in the Katbek Valley. So that whole Katbek Valley should have been called Johannesburg Maqoma, because that Katbek Valley is very rich, but our people were pushed out of it because precisely it was rich. Now, if we don't touch those wounds, we're not going to be able to settle the land question. That's my argument. Now, as a farmer, Jeremy, I'm not that big a farmer. 534 hectares is not a big farm. I can tell you, it's not a big farm, but it's substantial if you compare to 0. Yeah. If you compare it to 0, it's big. But if you compare it to all my neighbors, the smallest neighbor I'm sitting with in that area, Elliot, is having 4,000 hectares. You see? That is the smallest owner there, 4,000 hectares around me. He surrounds me almost like an amoeba. Now, that is the debate we should have. Therefore, the debate that was introduced in the conference, adopted by the conference, of expropriation without compensation should be located to the emotional side of land hunger. And the emotional side of history, it should be actually be debated whether it is real expropriation or restoration. Now, I'm raising that. It's not in the resolution. I'm raising it because when you restore, you are not expropriating, you are restoring both dignity and ownership of land. And that is the debate we should be having, because you see, Tobi is from a small dorp called Kala, you see. But when it is me, we call it a city. When it is him, it is a small dorp. He knows in the mountains between Fonondil and Lower Kala, there is a place called Ifam Yakwamandashepa. There's a farm there. But there is history behind that farm, I want you to know it. It's 333 Morgan, bought by my grandfather in 1930. He bought the farm in an area called Ida. But he couldn't get that land. He had to go to the native Kalanga district to farm, which was more barren in terms of the quality of land and grass. And he was moved. He bought this land. He worked in the farms. He collected livestock and sold it and bought land. He wanted it in Elliot, in Ida. But they said, but you can't have a farm here. You must go to the native Kalanga. That's why we ended in that mountain. Very small arable piece, mainly a mountain, because as a native we couldn't access land in Ida. We had to go to the native Kalanga. So in this debate, you must touch those emotional aspects of land dispossession, because if we are not talking about them, we're not going to heal, and it's not going to happen. Now, the ANC in December resolved, let me read the resolution. The ANC should, as a matter of policy, pursue expropriation of land without compensation. This should be pursued without destabilizing agricultural sector, without endangering food security in our country, and without undermining economic growth and job creation. Now, as an activist, I used to say when we resolve, once in your resolution you say not, that is not a resolution. Once you add not, you should not, you should not, you should not, that is not a resolution. It's more a caution than a resolution. The resolution is that expropriate the land without compensation. And then we said, let's talk about food production, economic, and one of the issues that we raised was, listen, what does that mean? It's important that you don't destroy food production. We looked at, we work very close with ZANU-PF. I've been to Mashonaland, I've been both west and east, went and see the issues. And I can tell you that in the long term, that program will benefit. But in the short term, it destroyed food production, precisely because they dived into it. Do you get my point? No proper preparation, no development, but later on, they attached extension officers to a group of small farmers of the 5 hectare a household, much later. That was trying to transform what was the land redistribution, almost described as land grab, into a productive program. Then attached an extension officer to a number of farms, another one for another farm, and so forth. And that tended, that's why last year they said we have the first good harvest for the first time since the land revolution. They said so, because they intervene much later. We have an opportunity to intervene up as we roll it out. Minister Maite, you are taking over a very difficult portfolio of land reform. You know, the difficulty with that portfolio is that it has the programs, but the programs are regulated by the bureaucracy in a way that destroys the intention. Now, let me explain this. You see, now I'm now not theorizing, I'm talking practical. You go there and you say, we are applying for recapitalization. Recapitalization, very good program. It is supposed to support farmers, new entrants to the industry, give them implements and so forth. And I gave up on recap on year 5. On the 5th year, I couldn't get it. I gave up. I started discovering that no, recap is here. So let me not wait for recap. I will never get. When they came after 5 years, they said, now you are having more than 100 cattle and more than 500 sheep. Therefore, you are now a commercial farmer, you can't be recapitalized. You see? now, so those programs are there, they're important, we must refine them. The danger with officials, I hope there are many here, is that their behavior is sit on issues, ministers come and go, we're here. And they destroy good programs with good intentions. If we don't address that, we are going to take a radical decision, they will not happen. Now, and in January, we undertook what we called a revolutionary pilgrimage as the new leadership of the ANC, which is still underway. We go to all the provinces, meet former leaders of the ANC, meet chiefs, meet kings, meet everybody, talk to everybody. Very good program, because it gives you access to talk to people. You know, I normally talk about Makoma. One of the things that I learned when I went to Limpopo, for the first time I discovered and given a book that the area Vembe was never colonized because Umakhadu was never defeated. When the Afghans attacked him, he dispersed them into all directions, and they disappeared and lost each other. They met in an area called in Limpopo, Sukmekar, because they were looking for each other and met in Sukmekar. You see, now, those pieces of history are very important for us to understand the land question. Levubu is the richest valley in South Africa. Is it used properly? Is it producing properly? Now, let me leave that, because what excites me in the debate is the historic aspect of it, because that historic aspect is going to help us understand why we feel so strong about accessing land. Skokuni was never defeated by the Afghans, including by General Beggars, who is after whom Beggars Fort is named. He never defeated him until he was reinforced by the British from KwaZulu-Natal. Only then could they capture Skokuni. Now, and therefore subdued him. Now, those pieces of history are important because history gets distorted all the time. And because that history is distorted, we can't have a sense in talking to one another. And my appeal, therefore, is we should talk to one another. We should talk to each other. We should engage. We should listen. We should understand. We should understand the fears of those who sit on the land when we talk of expropriation without compensation. The reality of the matter is that it is not a policy to drive white to the sea. That is not the policy. It has never been a policy of the ANC. It will never be the policy of the ANC unless the ANC becomes something else. It's not. It's about fair distribution of land and give our people access to that land. That debate is the debate we're having in mining, Jeremy, that, listen, you can't monopolize wealth. Black people must have access to wealth. Black people must have access to land. There's a man in Ugi who owns 21,000 hectares of land. Without asking the question whether it is productive or not, It is just unfair for one man to have 21,000 hectares of land when everybody stays around him hungry for land, you see. It's just unfair. Before you go to the content, it's just unfair, you know. There's a man in Quinton. He's a big farmer. He mobs us every farm that comes to the market. He buys it. He has bought the entire Ida area. The entire Ida area is owned by a single man in Queenstown. It can't be fair. When we talk of expropriation without compensation, those are the first candidates for the expropriation. When a person is greedy, when a person becomes greedy and takes every piece of land to himself, that person should be the first candidate for expropriation, because he's not needing land, he's greedy. He's greedy. We must deal with greed without being soft on greed. Greed is dangerous, Jeremy. You must appreciate that around you people are hungry for land. They must access that land. You must get land that is sufficient for you to produce, but the other one must be released. That's my argument for today. And number 10, lastly, you know, the resolution in Parliament, I think we're making too much of it. The reason that we've started this process, you know why we started this process? We started in the ANC. There's a paper of the ANC which is here. It's called a mandate for transformation. That is what we label this debate about. It's a mandate for transformation. And this paper, which this process will fit into, is intended to allow a rational discussion and debate on the land question. That's what it is meant. And you can't discuss the land question without going through a painful process. You must touch the raw nerves. The intention is not to make anybody feel bad or destroy anybody. The intention is that let's come to the party, let's appreciate the sensitivity of the land question. I'm sure TP, the CEO of Land Bank, will be able to say you how imbalanced is the book of the Land Bank on land. Big chunk of that book is with the white farmers. Small portion is with black farmers. Very small portion. I hope you can share that with us, because it is a tool of transformation in Land Bank if it is used appropriately. If it is used appropriately, you can look into all these tools of transformation, transform the sector, make it a sector of the people. You know, Jeremy, I think mining must be part of the discussion on land. You know why? Sometimes they go and get the mineral underground, and there's a big farm on top, on the surface, that is not used for anything. That land must be subjected to this debate, because that is land that can be used for something else. You can't leave that land barren because there's a mineral underneath. Go underground, take the mineral, but use the surface land for production. And the keynote for me, the keyword for me, is productive use of land. It's not only about farming, it's also about urban productive use of land. It's about all the categories of land. The keyword to me is productive use of land. Therefore, people who are given any piece of land, one thing we must ensure is that they are using that land productively. So the last debate that is raised on this matter is a debate about size of farms and productivity thereof. And the argument that we're moving to a mega farm era. Small farms will not be productive. That is another myth that should be demystified. Intensive farming happens in small pieces of land, you know. I have two kids who love farming as well, Jeremy. They are into chicken farming. They don't need 500 hectares. They need 10 hectares, and they farm productively and generate sufficient money to survive. Produce 2,000 chicken every 6 weeks, 2,000 chickens every 6 weeks, 2,000 chicken. For them, it's good cash flow, it works well. So this myth of mega farms as the future is another myth that should be demystified in this debate. I appreciate in a debate like this, there is no keynote speak. There is contribution to a debate, and the debate must flow. If you disagree with that, I said, here, you have all the freedom to say you are talking rubbish, it will not work in real life, that's it. That's why we're here. Okay. And I will take it, because I have a thick skin, I've been attacked by many people, including Jeremy himself. So I'm used to being attacked in debates. It's not a big deal for me. The big deal is whether we're going to talk to each other rationally, try to understand the problem. You know, Zimbabweans, when they come to South Africa, they always laugh at us and say, "What are you talking about? I came through the Beit Bridge, all the big tracts of land are owned by white farmers. What are you talking about?" You see? And we have to defend, our system is systematic and step by step and so on. So, yes, that's what we say all the time, try to argue, step by step. We're not going to be just reckless and so forth and so forth. But the reality of the matter is people are hungry for land, the land, they don't access it. Thank you very much.
Minister, thanks very much. Please give him another round of applause. I think we would agree that matters of history, emotionality, the potential for anarchy, greed, and so forth that Minister has raised are important matters across our landscape and the rationality of our discourse. Not long ago, we were speaking about the politics of fear, the economics of greed, and the culture of indifference that oftentimes toxifies our environments so that it hampers our ability to advance. And I think today we have a wonderful opportunity to engage openly. We are running well to time, colleagues, and I'm just going to ask Professor Binedell to come and explain one or two matters logistically to us, because I'm aware that after this we also have a press conference which will be very short, and I'm going to ask you to assist me to please remain on time and to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll break to tea just outside in the courtyard, and if you haven't finished your tea, please just bring your cup along so that we can start timelessly at 10:15. I'll just ask Professor Nick Binedell to give us some logistics. Thank you.
So let me just say, so we're going to break for tea now and be back at 15:15 if you can. We've got back on track, so that's very helpful. Thank you, Minister, for your remarks. There's a media room in classroom 1, which is diagonally across where we'll hold a brief press conference now. So I'm inviting the media to join in that conference. I'll come with you. But I did make an omission. I just wanted to give an apology from Rolf Meyer, who was also part of assembling this dialogue and who's run a number of dialogues here at Gibbs and elsewhere around farming. Some of you may know he's had a hip op 10 days ago. So he does send, especially to the Minister, Rolf Meyer sends his apologies and best wishes to you. And I'm sure that you will reciprocate, and I will send him ours to him. But he was unable to be here. So let's break for tea now. It'll be in the foyer. And if I can invite the press, classroom 1, diagonally across the way, if you'd like to come to the press briefing.